Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Well, okay. Well, shifting gears, let's talk Skye Bioscience. Can you give us an overview?
Yeah, so it's a very exciting technology. So we're working on this whole class of compounds that are linked to this endocannabinoid system. So it's modulating the endocannabinoid system. So our lead asset is a receptor that we're targeting called cannabinoid receptor 1, or it's known as CB1. And we're basically binding to this receptor to have a disease modification. And we've chosen glaucoma as the initial lead indication for this particular molecule. And now that is a program that's in phase 1 clinical trials. And we're going to be beginning phase 2 clinical trials in the middle of this year. So it's a really compelling technology. It's the first in class in this particular area in ocular diseases. We think it's a transformative new class of therapeutics. We have a deeper pipeline that goes beyond targeting CB1, and we are just continuing to build on that portfolio. So the lead asset is in the clinic. We also have other assets that are preclinical at this stage. And we're working on generating human clinical data in 2023. And it's come a long ways in the last 2 years. The team is very lean. It's about 13 people. A lot of my management or my peer group in the company, we've worked together in another company and another company as well. And the board is experienced in ophthalmology, biochemistry, antibodies, and oncology. So great, all well-rounded, team of people that have developed drugs, and we're continuing to make advancements as fast as possible. It's all about efficiency in drug development because we're non-revenue at the moment, so we have to continue to be acting with austerity and moving along our development as efficiently as possible, and we hope that our stakeholders get a return on invested capital based on the clinical inflection points for the company.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think that's a really interesting point because I think a lot of people really take for granted just how much money and effort goes into the that pharma puts into developing any new drug, any new you name it. It's a ton of money, and to be so now for the biotech startup that's pre-revenue, how do you even manage that? How's that? Take me through the trials and tribulations there, because that's a lot to bite off on.
Yeah, so I can take a step back. I'm a big proponent of overall life science development. Yes, it's a unique business model because you're going negative until you have potential revenue. Revenue comes in two forms. It's a commercialization of the product. And most often in biotech, it's revenue from out licensing or an exit of the product. And because it has bio dollars through a big pharma giving you an upfront and milestone payments and royalties and that kind of stuff. So it is a unique business model. It is very risky because there's a lot of drugs that fail. I think last count I was typical drug takes 900 million or maybe more now to get through development. And in ocular therapies, I don't think it's that much. It's different because we're concentrating on the biology in the eye, but still, it is a very expensive endeavor. I'm a proponent of life science development because there is still a lot to be unpacked in terms of unmet medical need. I think there's a ton of opportunity. I came into the industry as a fairly young entrepreneur. I started my first company at age 29. I was an executive prior to that for a pharmaceutical company, heading up corporate finance and operations. But I'm not a scientist, so it's a very unique kind of experience. I came from the corporate finance world, concentrated a lot of uh, uh, my career development was in M&A and looking at unique assets, in licensing assets, out licensing assets, bringing in companies, technologies, a lot of the different financial engineering around product development or accessing grants. I think I've read on your bio, is it, you have and your experience, you worked with some grants as well in your area. So there's a lot of different accountability that's come along with that. With you have accountability to universities, you have an accountability with different pharma partners, lots of milestones. So I'm not. Uh, I think I feel confident around the different players and stakeholders involved in this business. So it's not everyone's cup of tea, but my big, I would say not pet peeve, but just generally, I think that young entrepreneurs shouldn't be afraid of going after life sciences, even though they're not a scientist. I think there's a lot of great scientists around and experienced clinicians that you can assemble a comprehensive team to advance a drug that has merit. And there are a lot of unique skills required in any business, and life sciences is no different than a technology business or a you know uh, automobile industry. There's almost the same correlation of building blocks and experience and expertise required in any one of these industries. So there's a huge plus of working in life sciences. You're working on the unmet medical need, as I pointed out. It has impact on society, especially if you're going after certain large opportunities. Sometimes even the rare opportunities have tremendous impact on society. I think there's a lot to be unpacked in terms of the way that certain diseases are now being managed. Like in my last experience, I was working in cancer immunotherapy and in oncology over a decade. That became the new forefront of what therapeutic class was available for patients that had cancer. And it was a game changer for most people that have cancer now. They have a better chance of living than ever. Medical devices are now, continuing to get more innovative. There's in the ocular setting, there's implants that have ability to do dosing. So I think that drug development has a lot of different angles. We saw what happened during the pandemic with the world coming together and developing under a tremendous amount of pressure, new vaccines that became available, and then at the same time on a country and regional level, there was other innovation that happened, with other regions kind of focusing on their own approaches in vaccines. So there's I think a lot to be discovered still, and there shouldn't be an aversion to going after life sciences. I think it takes a bit of courage, but it is a business model that is very rewarding on the development side and on the entrepreneurial side.
Oh, for sure. And I like your point about the basically the fundamental building blocks of any company, whether it's a tech company, a janitorial company. You've got this. You still need the management. You still need finance. You still need all of these pieces that are the same, no matter what the industry is. You got to tweak them a little bit, sure, but the basics are the same. So you see plenty of kids going out and raising money to start a new tech company, who know nothing about the underlying technology or anything. They've got the idea, the business plan, and they get funding for it. So I think to your point, it shouldn't just be Silicon Valley stuff. There's a whole there's a whole industry that should be attracting that talent as well. And you don't have to be a scientist to go after it.
Yeah, and do you notice like sometimes like that a novel experience or some outside experience coming into a unique industry brings a whole new perspective. So it's usually you're able to make those big innovation leaps. When Google started looking into investing in healthcare, or Apple looking at it from healthcare and devices, like they're able to transcend all of what's been happening in the industry for decades and come out with okay, we're going to be doing glucose monitoring on your
Isn't that crazy?
on your watch soon, right? Which is a very, very impressive. So I think there's still a lot of opportunity, and there's now this great overlap that's starting to happen between industries. AI has been a game changer. There's been huge adoption of ChatGPT and the efficiencies that you can have with just rudimentary work that AI can do that helps with workflow and improving workflow. And yeah, it's going to be exciting to see. I think there's like I was always as a kid, and I got involved in the life science industry at about 19. I started working for a healthcare fund, so I got a great experience working on writing these investment memorandums. So I was working for this fund, and I would basically have to collate all of this data and then submit the investment memorandum to the investment committee that uses this information. So it was great because I got a chance to do some deep diving into different companies or technologies or like segments of life sciences, and through osmosis, learning all of that on the financial side as well as the science side, or the business aspects or the commercial reasons why these products are being developed was really helpful to get a broad grasp. And then over time, you start specializing in different areas. But every decade, it seems like I'm kind of working on a new unique area. In the first part of my career, I started off in oncology. It was a drug device combination. Then we went into vaccines, and then I started a company focused on cancer immunotherapy. So it was an evolution of an oncology product, and now working on a company that's developing ocular drugs, or a completely different class, like these cannabinoid pharmaceuticals. So I think it's really interesting that, like, I'm not a specialist in any one of those areas, but over time, you take the time to read the literature, surround yourself with really smart people that have experience developing those drugs, ask a lot of questions constantly, and continue to help bring you how my skill sets or my CFO's skill sets that maybe are the non-science people on the team can help to continue to push the envelope on development.
Well, I absolutely love founder stories. Just kind of where did the idea come from? How did you put it together? How'd you put the team together? How'd you finance it? Can you take us through tell us what you can about the founding story of Skye Bioscience?
Scraping. So yeah, it's
They're the best ones. There you go.
Yeah, unfortunately, like it's not. It's I joke internally, and like I'm a class of life science entrepreneurs that isn't a part of the, let's call it, the biotech mafia. There's certainly a class of biotech entrepreneurs, or let's say venture backed companies, that it's just like the tech industry. You go to your venture partner and you got your milestones, and you go back to your venture partners, you get new milestones. But we don't have that same luxury. Like in this particular case, I was a board member, I was an investor, and then I got involved because wanted to see some changes made, and then took on the responsibility of being the CEO, then basically kind of resetting everything. And I was employee one, and then continuing to build on that team. So some of it was calling upon people that I've worked with in the past that I know have a strong capability stack or experience that was complementary to what we're doing. Others was introductions to new people. Others was recruiting. And now slowly we built up an organization that has all of the capabilities from clinical development all the way to R&D. And we've raised approximately 34 million to date over the last 2 years through a mixture of financing, 21 million through financing, and about another 13 to 14 through a strategic acquisition, which was a business that we purchased, that we shut down the business and we leveraged their cash and real estate. So 2022 was certainly a year to be creative because the equity markets weren't as accessible, and with valuations continuing to be crunched, we had to be open-minded about new ideas. So I was really open to looking at different opportunities. I was sitting on a board of a company that wasn't their business plan wasn't working out really well for their shareholders, and came up with a proposal that would be a win-win for their shareholders and our shareholders. And the outcome was that we had the capital to advance our clinical pipeline, which would be ultimately a win for all of the shareholders. So I haven't been against being creative in different time points in our lives. Like I was in the part of I had a front row seat during the 2008 financial crisis. I had a front row seat during the pandemic, and I've had a front row seat in terms of the current contraction that we've seen in the marketplace. And each one of those has required all of these different experiences to rely on to be okay. Well, let's continue to be open-minded and creative about how we're going to continue making advancement, because that's what it comes down to. For my job, it's remove obstacles, keep moving the company forward, and keep the company funded. Right? As a CEO, that's where the simplest way to put my job description. And I want to make the shareholders money or have a return on their invested capital over time as well. And I think that's possible with the technology that we're developing.
I mean, that is wild. Yeah, I mean, can you go into that? Is this an underdog reverse merger that we're talking about? I mean, it's fascinating. I'd love whatever details you can share. I mean, even just the mindset of it, to kind of share how do you even so the idea, how do you come up with that's so if you could, I'd love to just whatever you can share on that would be great.
Yeah. And so it's all public. I mean, you can read upon it on any of our press releases. Certainly, it has its advantages and disadvantages. The advantages are of what I just outlined in terms of creating a win-win scenario. And I think the best way to create a win-win scenario is being very clear about the rationale. And I think in most startup environments or speculative companies, it's about outlining a strategy. How do you get from point A to point B, and being very transparent about that with everyone, saying, yeah, this is the challenges and this is how we're going to get there. And most speculative companies and technologies don't do a very effective job of that. I think that's a void that we see time and time again, where it's like this black box that we're going to create value, but not a clear explanation of how that value is being created. If you're Facebook and you're Mark Zuckerberg and you're working on the metaverse and you're spending $10 billion behind a curtain and you're going to be Willy Wonka, that's completely different. Or if you're Tim Cook creating the next car that you never have really publicly spoke about, but people are speculating, that's completely a different realm. They're revenue companies. They have tremendous amount of cash flow. We don't have that luxury. We have to be very clear about how do we develop a technology that potentially has an exit that is commercially relevant. And we've chosen glaucoma being a path that can be a great return on invested capital. So coming back to this whole scenario, the disadvantages are the challenges of going into an environment like that, saying, okay, your business isn't working, your balance sheet is upside down, and we believe we have a better solution for your shareholders. And yeah, that takes a lot of courage to pull something like that off. This was a
Now,
unique. Sorry,
were
go ahead.
you, I'm sorry, were you private at the time and this was your reverse merger to go public, or was this, you were already public and you leveraged that to get this other company that you were on the board of, that things weren't quite working out, but
Yeah,
then by merging with them, you then got the assets of the business, their investors, their, all of these to come on board and kind of expand your company. Is that
correct.
basically how this went?
Yeah, it was actually both companies were public.
Oh,
So
okay.
their public company was underwater from a balance sheet perspective. Their cash was much higher than what their market cap was. So the shareholders weren't getting any value for even the cash. And that's
Oh,
where
wow.
we said, hey, this could be to your advantage. We can give you a premium to your market value
Right.
because we can give you value exactly at cash based on a fairness opinion. And we're giving you a clear rationale in terms of how there's an exit for your investors. So if your investors want to get out, there's going to be liquidity to get out because we're also public. But if your investors want to stay in, there's a upside associated with this. And the challenge in this scenario was related parties because I'm a board member on both companies. So it's one is, you know, yeah, there's an aspect of the genesis of the idea, but then there's an aspect of also being clear about how to um, accomplish that
Yeah.
task. So in this case, we had to set up very clear uh, a separation. That we had a special committee on both companies. We went through a full um, review of other potential opportunities, not only on this side, but they did as well. We looked at, uh, doing everything we could to establish independence along the way, including separate shareholder meetings. And so it was a unique structure. I think it was a one of a kind in terms of being able to do. And I mean, I haven't given up in terms of looking at, continuing to be creative. I don't think we'll go through something as extensive as that, but I think that there is a lot of opportunity that was presented in 2022 where many companies, I think at one point I did this analysis or I got I had an analysis done of like 180 companies listed on the NASDAQ that were trading below what their cash was in biotech,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
Which is something, right? So they weren't getting any enterprise value.
Yeah.
And so that's a unique situation. I think it takes a lot of courage to as a management team to one sit down and think, okay, am I getting any enterprise value? If not, what are my milestones ahead of me before I erode that cash, and
Yeah.
will I make it, or should I rethink this whole strategy? And maybe there's a unique way to pivot at this point. And I think I'm always opportunistic. I think in terms of looking at those kind of unique opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting when you have so many in biotech where you don't get the advantages of the capital markets because people associate so much risk with it. It almost makes you wonder, well, why are you public at all if it comes
Yeah.
with that, if you're not getting the advantages there? I'm sure some do, but that's got to be tough. How do you manage, how have you managed with Skye to do that, and not have kind of the massive speculation hit or risk hit, if you will, for being pre-revenue. And what you're going into to stage 2 clinical trials. So is how do you keep from experiencing the same thing that the company you merged with was experiencing?
Yeah, so that was a different business. They were the over-the-counter
Okay.
products, and it was challenging. There was oversaturation in the market where their products weren't
Uh,
uh, selling. In this case, what we're doing is the differentiation. So the class of compound, the class of the indication is what's driving the value, and fundamentally hitting the milestones along the way. So we've been very deliberate about demonstrating the progress from when this management team took over this company. So we as a management team and board are not the founders of this company, but we're the current stewards of the progress and the value creation. So I think it's very clear, very important to be clear about what are those inflection points along the way, and demonstrating the differentiation of this class of compound or this lead asset relative to the marketplace. So it's pretty easy for people to correlate that, okay, there's a large market for glaucoma, $6 billion market, but Skye has the potential to have a piece of pie, a slice of pie of that market. And what's the risk profile that we're willing to take to do, basically a discounted cash flow on that that opportunity. And every step along the way, we're hoping to mitigate that risk with the clinical progress. Certainly, it was a different place 2 years ago where we didn't even have a formulation for the drug. Now we're in phase 1 clinical trials where we've confidently displayed safety from our drug, and the next step is phase 2, where we're going to be measuring, in addition to safety, we're measuring efficacy in glaucoma patients and ocular hypertension patients. So if we're able to show this, the main disease modifier, which is lowering of intraocular pressure in glaucoma, that's going to be a great outcome, because that will signal to the market that there's finally a new drug that's able to demonstrate efficacy for these patients that have very limited innovation in the last 2 decades.
That's fantastic. And what is I know it's kind of conjecture, I guess, to some point, but I think what you're saying is part of the value of the management team, and the reason the capital markets are kind of more supportive, is because you're being very clear, and you've come up with pretty clear plans, and you've laid those out. You've hit your milestones. Can you share what is the plan going forward? Is it after, let's say phase 2, clinical trials goes well, what's the plan in phase 3? Is there are we looking at a pharma play, or is it going to market, or what can you share with us on that, if anything?
Yeah, the goal for us is to commercialize the drug with a commercial partner. So the key inflection point that we're working towards is getting to phase 2 trial, phase 2 data. So there's 2 parts to our phase 2. There's the part A and a part B, and both of those have very important kind of data points for us for the overall package to present to a potential commercial partner. So I think investors or stakeholders are expecting that's going to be the outcome, and us as a management team and board have done that historically. So collectively, our team has been successful at partnering drugs with big pharma. So we're ultimately expecting that. We don't want to build out a commercial infrastructure at Skye. We want to work with the top ophthalmology drug developers, because they already have their call points, they have that infrastructure, and they would take it from there. So phase 2 is going to be the key major inflection point, and then from a pipeline innovation and evolution standpoint, we have another drug candidate that's on the heels of our lead asset. So either our lead asset bifurcates into more than one indication, glaucoma and something else, or our next clinical asset, then comes into the pipeline if the first lead asset becomes partnered. Then there's also the possibility that everything that we're doing collectively, holistically, is something that is attractive to a partner. They not only like what they see on their lead asset, they're saying, okay, this class of compounds has potential to be an overall platform, because whatever reason, the usual reason for big pharma is their IP is running out, and they're looking for innovative new things to plug and play into their whole infrastructure. So that would be the ideal scenario. I think everyone would be happy if there's an exit like that, and it's been proven to happen. It's just time and getting there. So
Okay.
that's what we're working towards. So this year is going to be a big year. We like in 2022 was just about getting these trials started. In 2023, we're enrolling between two studies over 100 patients
Nice.
for these for our lead asset. So that's exciting for us. We're going to have a very strong database of human data and clinical data, and collectively, I think that's what's going to be wholesome to be able to present to a commercial partner.
Marvelous. Now, phase two can be, I guess, it can vary wildly between as little as weeks to months or even years.
Mhm.
Is there any? Do you have any idea what you might be looking at for your phase two for your lead?
Yeah, so our data is going to be based on 2 weeks endpoint. So it is a I would say a smaller lead time than oncology drugs, which often take 6 months or even in some cases survival data. So the ophthalmology drugs, I think there is an opportunity for some level of efficiency there. Um, we'll work our way up to 3 months of data in our phase 2B, and that's what we're working towards now. So initially for our phase 2A, it'll be 14-day data.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me ask you. I know you may be getting short on time, but if you still have a few moments, I'd love to talk to you about Yale Canada, and
Oh yeah.
if you could tell us about your work there, that would be great.
Yeah,
Introduce
it's really
what Yale is, and yeah,
yeah, Yale's been awesome. We've been working on a uh, like basically the first high school entrepreneurship course eligible for university credit, and it's providing youth with like basically all the practical tools and experiences they need to hopefully succeed. And it is geared towards business and entrepreneurship, but I would say that the more macro way to look at that is leadership skills. And and it's a program that's established in Canada, and it's been around now for almost a decade, and continuing to grow. At a fairly conservative clip, and now we're finally getting into some unique national other national other cities across the country. So we're looking at uh, constantly expanding. One of the unique things about this program is that the students are getting real practical experience by entrepreneurs coming into the classroom and speaking to the students. And then the other part of the experience is that they get to participate in a business plan competition. And it's much like Shark Tank, where they present to a bunch of VCs, and there's a kind of the semifinals and the finals every year. So there's a bit of notoriety around certain schools or certain uh, what's it called uh, not school zones, but
the
the
districts there
yeah,
maybe.
districts and constituents
Hmm.
that have had more wins, and there's a bit of yeah competitiveness amongst the students. But this year, the Venture Challenge coming up actually in April is the semifinals, and May is going to be the finals. And yeah, we're continuing to make a lot of investment in that. So it's a program that I co-founded with two other entrepreneurs in Canada, and all of us come from different disciplines. One of the co-founders, who's the managing director, is Amit Sandhu, and he's a like one of the most prominent developers. The other co-founder is his name is Ratan Baga, and he's been um, involved in wellness, and also his uh, their business has been in the food industry. So they have um, uh, I guess they have like distribution in of their whole ingredients in a lot of different businesses, restaurants to Whole Foods. And So, and then I come from the life sciences space. So collectively, we've been young entrepreneurs that have continued to build our own experience in our respective areas. And then we've continued to build a great community around that with teachers and students and alumni now and parents, as well as the district superintendents and a lot of endorsement. And it's also funded by the government. So we've been
Wow.
able to get a mixture of government grants as well as industry grants with different partners.
That's fantastic. So if any entrepreneurs, watching or listening wanted to participate or help or, kind of further the cause, what could they do?
Well, they can just go to the website, yalecanada.org, and there's a tab called Get Involved, and there's many different ways to get involved. Everything at a community level, your student participating and seeing where the classes are available. If they're not available at your school, there's other ways to certainly participate in the curriculum. And yeah, there's all the information's on the website on yalecanada.org.
I love it. Okay, and we like to ask all of our guests if they've got a particular mentor that they'd like to share with everybody. Kind of that you'd like to, whether it was an
Yeah.
author, a person that kind of guided you along the way, whatever it was.
Yeah, I think that like I've benefited from a lot of different coaches in my life, athletic coaches, so like swimming coaches or triathlon coaches. So they've certainly been mentors in their own right because they offered a certain amount of structure and accountability to continue advancement. And then I've had I really appreciated kind of the other professionals that I've met in my career. So one of the inspiring people has been the scientific co-founder of the last company I was involved with, Dr. Adil Dowd. He's been a great, I think, risk taker and uh, proponent of advancing the progress in oncology, and he took a risk working on the technology that we were working on in the last company, and he's continued to be a very preeminent melanoma doctor and skin cancer doctor. So it's people like that are always like on the cutting edge, and they're really humble in terms of advancing that what they believe in, and and it seems like it's the ultimate kind of place to be in terms of fulfillment because I mean, I don't think I mean, sure, there's a financial element uh, of any profession, but certainly from what I've experienced by working with him, it's never been a financially driven thing. It's always been about what the patient outcomes could be with these cutting edge therapies. So I like that mindset, and I think that there's been a lot of similar people that I've come across in the life science industry that are really interested in making a difference for patients. On the author side, I like to read. So I mean, one of the books that I have always leaned on is one of which was one of my favorites, is The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. And it's basically like a guidebook for startups on how to build and grow their businesses in a very cost effective way. I also like Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. I'm looking forward to that movie that's coming out soon called Air Jordan. Or yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Hmm.
And I've also enjoyed Jim Collins. I've had a chance to meet Jim Collins on several occasions. I've read all of his books. I think one of my favorites is Good to Great, and so those are some books that I'm sure a lot of people have come across, but those are the ones that come to mind right now.
Fantastic. And then for the cyber aspect of the cyber business
Oh yeah.
podcast, just to throw it in there at the end, we had such a good time talking about everything else. I got to ask you, on a lot of manufacturing, we've got a lot of manufacturing clients with Cyberlinks and there's lots of of cyber attacks now on the manufacturing aspect. I'm kind of curious on the biotech side. Is that something that you guys are seeing a lot of? Or is it just on the financial stuff, lots of phishing attempts? What are you guys seeing on your end there?
Did you did you look at our press releases, and did you know that we got hit with a cyber attack?
I did not. No.
Okay, so last year, this was one of the things I was hinting at before about obstacles out of your control. Our manufacturing, clinical development manufacturing organization got hit with a cyber attack, and it basically threw a wrench in our whole timelines. So we were ready to go to manufacturing, and it was literally weeks before our clinical trial is about to start. We just got regulatory approval from the ethics committee. We're finishing the expectation was to finish our manufacturing, ship the drug off, and our clinical trial would start. And we got hit with this notification that the CDMO was hit with a cyber attack, and it was one of the most challenging things I've ever experienced, because I've never been involved in one of these things, and we didn't like, this was an internal thing. This was all, working with our manufacturing partner, and you should have seen my frustration level, because I didn't recognize how all of these systems on the IT level are all integrated with these controls and the way that, whatever the aseptic conditions that are required for a certain manufacturing site. And I'm like, why can't we do everything manually? Why do we need, to connect it to the servers? And having them kind of, the challenges that they had to deal with in terms of dealing with the intrusion, resetting up their system, and then also our timelines, meeting our timelines. So yeah. We thankfully, were able to manage through that. It certainly was a reputational challenge, because we had set out expectations and guidance on timelines, and then we had to push them out. And as a public company, that's always a very difficult thing to do. And in a situation like this, where you're trying to, do everything we can to control timelines, and you have this anomaly situation that was very, very frustrating. But we navigated through it, and we were also successful in terms of managing with our CDMO to be the first one out of the gate once the manufacturing was open, because then there was this whole backlog we had to deal with. And we were already dealing with 2021 backlog with supply chain issues. So if you take into account manufacturing delays associated with just materials, like we have a very specific nylon filter that's used for our manufacturing. Well, this nylon became rare, and I think we were in control of the majority of these filters in the world in 2022. Then it turns into the cyber attack that ends up having impact to timelines. But I don't ever want to experience that again. It did prompt us to start thinking about more of preventative measures at Skye in-house. So not only from an insurance standpoint, but other internal controls and systems, more two-factor authentication. We get all the same stuff, lots of phishing attempts, but our team's pretty sophisticated to know that I don't send an email in the middle of the day to send a wire to some mysterious person. we're like these people are really like silly to think that that's how it happens. But it is pretty interesting, like how some people in their phishing scams are very sophisticated to understand the company's process and try to circumvent. I don't know how they do that, but they must do a mass approach and see what sticks.
Well, it's wild because there's so many different, the attack surface is so broad, even for a relatively small manufacturer. There's so many ways to get in. And statistically, 60 to almost 90% of those attacks end up happening because somebody makes a mistake, right? They plug in something they shouldn't have. They downloaded something. They clicked on something they shouldn't have. Or they reused, and a very typical one is they reuse the same password because they're tired of, they don't use a password manager, and
Yeah.
they only write down but so many, and so they reuse that, and one of those passwords gets compromised. They didn't have multi-factor authentication on, or you name it, and so these just become very easy ways in. So once they're targeting a specific one, and I love the fact that most small businesses think that they're too small. Most small manufacturers. We had a private equity firm come to us that had gotten hit, and they thought they were too small. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
In their world, they're tiny. I get it. You're a guppy, but in the world of the normal people, even normal business, you're a large target for for some third world hacker. You got tons of money. They only need a small chunk of that, and you've made their year, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
really funny. It happens far too easily and often. But yeah, so well, that's a great story.
Yeah, we learned from this externality situation, but it did help us beef up our own internal. Like, one of the things I've been proud of with this organization is that we, compared to a decade ago, even, or although we have a server room here, it just houses the switch, I think, that is mainly for our internet. Everything else is in the
Cloud-based.
virtual environment, right? And
Yep.
all of the systems that we use, we have every single internal control here at the organization is in some sort of virtual environment or virtual application. And it's been, I think it's been game changing in terms of productivity, because the systems now, they talk to one another. So you can be on disparate um, applications
That's right.
that are capable of speaking to one another, more than just the office environment. Like, the Microsoft environment's great because it has Teams and all of that integration on the Office suite. But if you're using like an accounting software that then talks to another application, or the accounting software talks to the SEC, we have a virtual environment just for all of our SEC filings, and because not all of our staff is located in San Diego, it's made us super productive to be able to work through all of our workflows and never skip a beat. Like, it's also saved a tremendous amount of money. I think, instead of having like everything housed on a server and then you have upgrades associated with you, I've become more comfortable with the aspect of purchasing the right types of applications, and then paying for the service fee associated with the upgrades or the continued evolution of that in the work environment that's required for your business.
That's right.
And that's where IT, I think, has really now stepped up a notch. Whereas, you remember back 2 decades ago, you had a Bez server and often like all these things that you had to like house, and it was everything, all your data had to be VPN'd into your closet at the office, and then it was a nightmare.
Yep. And not anymore. But it's funny because it's just like, we all learn that lesson about saving, whatever you're working on, saving it frequently and backing up. Everybody learns that lesson the hard way. And
Yeah.
it's sad that so many people are having to learn the lesson of cybersecurity, and basic cyber hygiene the hard way. But it is funny because once you've learned it, you learned it because somebody you were connected to it, and it impacted you. But we're starting to see that there's a cyber risk, not just for you but your partners as well, and it impacts us. We're a very interconnected world now. So whoever you're doing business with, them getting attacked can affect you. So we're finding that going back to like private equity, we're now helping the people that they do deals with to make sure that before those deals are announced, that their
Mhm.
cybersecurity is up to speed, because once they announce, they become a bigger target. Right. And so even before that, you got to make, kind of spreading that idea of, hey, while we're talking, how are you guys? And it should be like, I look forward to the day where it's common in business parlance to be like, what are you guys doing for cybersecurity? Because if you get hit, it can't impact us. And, I get that your insurance will pay for it maybe, but that's not going to help us so much when we take a reputational ding.
No, we look at it as from a sophistication standpoint. That's one of the things we do for due diligence now. Whenever we're looking at outside parties, a potential partner, it is a sign of how sophisticated that team is in terms of the way that they've set up their internal controls. Not that, we're saying we know all of it, but I think we're proud of what we've been able to build like over time.
Mm-hmm.
And we're at a place right now where we have the redundancies that make us comfortable. So it's a good baseline to then do a comparison against others, saying, okay, well, that's an exposure that we're going to have to equate for or whatever. So yeah, it's certainly, things are moving fast. I'm pretty excited to see, how that's working out well. And as long as I don't have to hire, kind of nothing against IT professionals. I just got to be a biotech company. We're being lean on that side. So
you got to.
I want to keep it to one FTE on the IT side, but it seems to be working out well because you have the outside providers.
Exactly. Yeah. That's perfect. Well, loved having you on. But before we go, can you tell people where they can learn more about and get a copy of your fantastic book?
Thanks.
So please. Where can they find it?
So the book is available on my website at punitdhillon.com. There's a tab, I believe, called book, and it's available on Amazon. So in multiple forms: hard copy, soft copy, digital, and audio. And appreciate the opportunity to speak about the book because I haven't done that in a while. And the company information is available on skyebioscience.com.
Fantastic. All right, Punit, it was an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for being on, and I keep up the great work.
Thanks so much, Matt. Appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.